Hello, this is Foster streaming live for the second time on Wednesday. We do that every Wednesday for now on, starting last week. And tonight we are going to talk about Allan Kardec's book, Heaven and Hell. Let me show you that book here. It's a book that gets little discussion from spiritists, but it's very interesting. It tells us a lot about spirits, the communication with spirits, and many other interesting factors. I'm just making sure that the stream, okay, yes. So this is the book, Heaven and Hell. You can see it right up there. And I think that we have some interesting things to tell. So let me get into the book, Heaven and Hell. So the book was one of his later books written by Allan Kardec. And I'm sure that many people will enjoy it immensely if you read it, because it does have a lot of information on spirits and the communities, and spirits from levels of heaven to spirits down in the lower zone and the dark abyss. And so I'm going to start with heaven and hell, and I'm going to talk about angels according to Spiritism. This is what Allan Kardec said about angels according to Spiritism. He said that there are beings endowed with all of the qualities commonly attributed to angels. Yep. Hello. For those who admit the existence and progressivity of the soul a matter of doubt, the Spiritist revelation confirms on this point the belief of all peoples, but it also shows us, Spiritism shows us the nature and origin of these beings, of these angels. Souls or spirits are created simple and ignorant. That is to say, without knowledge and without the consciousness of good and evil, but with the aptitude of acquiring in knowledge and in morality all that they lack, and with which they will acquire through effort and labor. So, what is he telling us? He is telling us that we have the capability of being angels. That yes, angels come from normal souls like we are, the ones who are very flawed, make mistakes throughout our life. And someday we will, as we become more and more mature and learned, we shall become angels. We shall become pure. And that is part of our progression. This is why it's so important for us to understand these things. So I would think people would find this vitally interesting. Jesus Christ himself started as a normal spirit who is now the governor of our planet. Who knows how many billions of lives and how many billions of years since he first was put into a human-like body with free will on a planet and started out like us. And of course, now he is just, what I've read from higher spirits from the Reverend G. Val Owen is that we are extremely lucky to have Jesus Christ as a leader of our planet. He's a leader of other planets besides, but everyone knows how special he is. So that is what Spiritism says about angels. Now, there's another thing. What does Spiritism say about demons and devils, right? Because there's so many the Catholic religion, it's, the devil does this, and, there's demons and et cetera, et cetera. Well, again, demons are us, right? They are, unfortunately, they are neither angels, nor devils. They're not beings apart from us. They are human type spirits that have, through their own ignorance and lack of self-discipline and their quest for material goods, their pride, maybe their quest for revenge, that they have landed either in the lower zone or below, which is, we call it the dark abyss, which is a type of purgatory, right? There's no such thing as hell. There's no such thing as eternal damnation in Spiritism. You do not go, if you murder someone, even if you're a horrible person, maybe you're, Kim Jong-un of North Korea or whatever, you will still have many lives to make up for all the harm that you did. And that one day you too shall be a perfect spirit. But let's say some dictator does die. That dictator will not go to heaven. That dictator will go to where he has affinity with other spirits. And that place will probably be the lower zone or the dark abyss. Now, when that person, that dictator, he or she is in that area, they will live in a space that is exactly like them. They will live with people who take advantage of them, treat them terrible. They will try to make slaves of him unless he has a greater will than the other person. He will be in exactly the environment that he created for his own people on earth. But then he was on the top, right? But he will most probably not be on the top when he goes down there. He will get everything that he gave. He will be with people just like him. Now, isn't that a great justice by God, right? Isn't that a wonderful process where if you are that type of person who wishes to command other people, take advantage of other people, then when you leave this human body, you're right where people love to take advantage of you, love to take from you. This is a lesson. Now, eventually these people decide, well, this isn't a very good idea. Maybe I should start doing good for people, then other people do good for me. I mean, it may start from a little bit of a selfish attribute, but then eventually they'll learn that service on itself just feels good and it's wonderful. So, it's just, it just shows you how intelligent it is, the way that God created and ordered our whole universe. Okay, now let's get into some examples, because this is really the part I think people will like. So in chapter 2 in the book Heaven and Hell, there is some examples of happy spirits, and that's what we'll talk about right now. We'll talk about happy spirits, and it's called Mr. Sanson. So this is what he says. This is what Allan Kardec says about Mr. Sanson. Mr. Sanson, one of the earliest members of the Spiritist Society of Paris, died on April 21st, 1862, after a year of intense suffering. Foreseeing his end, he had addressed to the present society a letter containing the following passage. So this is what he wrote before he died. In view of the possibility of a sudden separation of my soul and body, I repeat the request that I made to you a year ago, that you evoke my spirit as quickly as you possibly can after my decease, and as often as you may think fit to do so, in order that I, who have been but somewhat useless member of our society during my sojourn upon the earth, may be of some use to it on the other side of the grave, by enabling it to study phase by phase through evocation the various incidents that follow what is commonly called death, but which for us spiritists is only transformation according to the impenetrable designs of God, and always useful for carrying out those designs. Besides this authorization and request that you will do me the honor to perform upon me this sort of spiritual autopsy, which my slight advancement will perhaps render sterile, in which case your own good sense will decide you to cut short the experiment, I venture to beg of you personally, and also to all of my colleagues, to pray the Almighty to permit the good spirits, especially our spiritual president, St. Louis, which is St. Louis, which was a past St. Louis of England, of France, of France. And he actually wrote a lot of the passages in the Gospel according to Spiritism and other parts of as a spirit, to assist me with their kindly counsels and to guide me in deciding on the choice and the epoch of my next incarnation. Oh, I hear a message says, hey, well, hello to you. I don't see a name on when you're commenting. Now, let me carry on. I should ask God too soon and too presumptuously a corporeal trial above my strength, which instead of aiding my advancement, would prolong my stay upon this earth or on some other one. So then, Allan Kardec, in his book, Heaven and Hell, wrote this: in order to confirm our friend's desire to be invoked as quickly as possible after his decease, we went to his house with a few members of the society. And there, in the presence of the corpse, oh, hello, Jacob. So he and members of the Spirit Society went during the wake they had at his house. And it said, now they had a double end in view. So first, to gratify the wish of the deceased, and next, to observe once more the situation of his body, right? The situation of his soul at a period so near death. An observation especially interesting in the case of one so intelligent and enlightened, and so deeply imbued with spirituous truth. So they wanted to see what would happen. So they were not disappointed, because this is what happened. In the death chamber on April 23rd, 1862, with his body still in the room, they evoked the spirit in the usual terms, and the following conversation took place. And he said, and the spirit says, I respond to your call in order to fulfill my promise. And then they said, oh, dear Mr. Sanson, it is both for us a duty and a pleasure to evoke you at once after your death, as you wished us to do. And he says, I thank God for permitting my spirit to hold communication with you, and I thank you for your kindness, but I feel weak, I tremble. He goes, and then they said, well, you suffered so much before your departure that I think we may fairly ask how you are. Do you still feel the pains that racked you so terribly? How does your present state compare with the state in which you were 2 days ago? And he answered, my state is a very happy one, for I no longer feel anything of my former pains. I am regenerated, made quite new, so to say. The transition from the terrestrial life to the spirit life was at first something that I could not understand, and everything seemed incomprehensible to me. And for we sometimes remained for several days without recovering our clearness of thought. But before I died, I prayed that God would give me the power of speaking to those I love, and my prayer was granted. Then they asked, how long was it before you regained your clearness of thought? And he said, about 8 hours. So very interesting. So just like, you're a baby at birth, you come out and, you start crying right away. You don't know what's going on. When you rebirth into the spirit world, you're confused. That's why usually, as I say in my other articles on nwspiritism.com, and you'll see my other videos on my YouTube or BitChute channel. You can get to my YouTube or BitChute channel by going on nwspiritism.com, clicking the right-hand navigation, and you'll see links to YouTube and BitChute. You also see books I've written about Spiritism, which you can look at, Heaven and Hell. You can look more of that on my book, Explore Your Destiny. And what I say a lot of this is that when you're a good spirit, that you're helped from your coming out of your shell. You're helped from your detaching your perispirit from your body. But unless you're very high spirit, it takes you a while to get your senses and get your bearings. And what they've also said in Spiritism is you don't have clear memories of your past lives. You don't regain those clear. You still are who you are, your character, your personality, your memories from Earth, from your current life that just passed. But you're not allowed everything yet until you're ready. So then they ask him, are you quite sure that you're no longer in our world? And if so, how do you know it? And the answer was, oh, most certainly, I'm no longer in your world, but I shall always be near you to protect and sustain you in calculating the charity and abnegation that were the rule of my life. And I shall help to spread the true faith, the faith of Spiritism, which is destined to rekindle the belief in truth and goodness. I am well and strong. I am, in short, completely transformed. You could not recognize me as the infirm old man whose memory was leaving him after he had left far behind him all the pleasures and joy of life. I am the descendant of the spirit world, freed from the bondage of flesh. My country is the illimitable space, and my future is God, whose power and glory radiate through immensity. I wish I could speak with my children, that I might urge upon them what they have always been unwilling to believe. Then they asked the question, What effect does the sight of your body lying here beside us produce on your mind? So isn't this fantastic that they're sitting there doing, like a mediums meeting, and then there's the body right there, and the spirit has left the body for good. So the body's probably starting in the decomposing, because Spiritism say when the paraspirit leaves, then the whole cells, and then they've lost their, they've lost their command structure, and then they start decomposing. So what effect does the sight of your body lying here beside us produce on your mind? And he says this: my body, poor paltry relic, will return to dust, but I shall continue to cherish the welcome remembrances of all those who esteemed you served as my passport. Poor decaying form, dwelling place of my spirit, instrument of my trial through so many weary years of pain. I look upon you and I thank you, my poor body, for you have purified my spirit, and the suffering 10 times blessed, which you caused me to endure, has aided me to win the place I now occupy, and to earn the privilege of speaking with these friends without delay. Then he asked, did you retain your consciousness to the last? So these are all interesting. I think people really want to understand this. And this is what he said. Yes, my spirit retained the use of all its faculties. I no longer saw, but I foresaw. The whole of my earthly life, too, passed before my mind. And my last thought, my last prayer was that I might be enabled to speak with you as I'm doing now. And I asked God that help might be given to you also in the matter, so that the desire of my life may be fulfilled. And then they asked, were you conscious of the moment that when your body drew its last breath? What took place in your being at the moment? What sensation did you experience? This is what he said. At the moment of separation, life seems to break down, and the sight of the spirit is extinguished. We seem to be in a great void, in the unknown, and then carried away as through a wonderful current of surprise, we find ourselves in a world where all is joy and grandeur. I no longer had any feeling. All sense of suffering was lost. I no longer understood anything that was going on in me or about me, and yet at the same time, I was filled with ineffable joy. So very interesting, isn't it? So then they met him later. They met him on April 25th, which is 2 days afterwards. So they gave him 2 days to rest. And they evoked his spirit again. And then they said, oh, we are much pleased with the conversation we had with you on the day of your funeral. And as you permit us to talk with you, we shall be very glad to continue our conversation, that we may obtain all the information you are able to give us. And he said, I'm quite ready to converse with you, and I'm happy to see that you still think of me. So then he asked, whatever can help to enlighten us in regard to the nature of the invisible world is of the utmost importance, both to us and to all. Therefore, please do not be astonished at the numerous questions we shall have to ask you. Because you have described with luminous clearness the passage from life to death. You have told us that at the moment when the body breathes last, life breaks down and the sight of the spirit is extinguished. Is this moment a painful one? Is it attended with any suffering? And he answers this, undoubtedly it is, for life is a succession of sufferings, and death is the complement of them all. For that reason, we feel a violent wrench, as though the spirit had to make a superhuman effort to free himself from his fleshly envelope. It is this effort that absorbs our whole being and makes us lose the consciousness of what we are becoming. Now, Allan Kardec puts a footnote that this is not the case in general. Experience shows us that many spirits lose consciousness before death occurs, and that with those who have reached a certain degree of dematerialization, the separation takes place without any effort. So there's differences for each person. Then the question is, do you know whether the moment of death is more painful for some spirits than for others? Is it more painful, for instance, in the case of a materialist, of him who believes that everything will be ended for him with the death of his body? And the answer is certainly. The spirit who is prepared for death has already forgotten his suffering, or rather, he is accustomed to it. And the mental quietness with which he sees the approach of death prevents him from suffering doubly, as he would otherwise do, because he knows what is awaiting him. Moral suffering is the most painful of it all, and its absence at the moment of death diminishes immensely the pain of the separation. He who does not believe in the future life is like a prisoner under the sentence of death, whose thought beholds both the gibbet and the unknown. There is a similitude between this death and that of the atheist. Are there materialists so rooted in their denial of immortality as to really believe in this solemn moment that they are about to be plunged into annihilation? And the answer is, there are undoubtedly some who believe that annihilation up to their last hour, but at the moment of separation, an entire change comes over the spirit mind. He or she is tortured by doubt and anxiously asks himself what is going to become of him. He seeks for something to cling to and finds nothing. The separation in such a case cannot take place without causing this impression. Now, a spirit, Allan Kardec says, a spirit on another occasion, because he wants to supplement what he's being told from this one spirit, right? This one spirit, Mr. Sampson, has only his experiences. So another spirit, so Allan Kardec wants to show what another spirit would say. So this is how another spirit described the end of a person who was a complete atheist, a complete unbeliever of the spirit world. That the fact is that we were just carbon-based material and that we lived somehow and we died and we went back to the earth. This is what this other spirit talked about, how this person died. The confused unbeliever experiences in his last moments all the anguish of the horrible nightmare in which the sleeper seems to be at the edge of a precipice, on the point of falling into the abyss beneath him. He makes the most agonizing effort to fly from the danger, and he is unable to move. He seeks in vain for something to stay him, some fixed point by which to keep himself out of the terrible void into which he feels himself to be slipping. He tries to call for help and is unable to make any sound. It is under the pressure of this frightful agony that the dying man is seen to writhe in convulsion of the death throes, wringing his hands and grasping out stifled, inarticulate cries, all of which are the certain indications of the nightmare from which he is suffering. In ordinary nightmare, your awakening relieves you of the despair that was oppressing you, and you rejoice to perceive that you've only been dreaming. But the nightmare of death often lasts for a very long time, even for years after the separation has taken place. And the suffering thus caused to the spirit is sometimes rendered still more severe by the thick darkness in which he finds himself. I've also read in other books by Henri Louis, and these books were about 100 years after this book, where that some people who are non-believers, right, who don't believe in any spirituality whatsoever, even though they're good people, but in their minds they just think there's nothing's going to happen, and they just kind of stay in this sleep, and they stay into this restful sleep, kind of like you say, maybe a nightmare for some people, or may just be nothing. And sometimes it takes years for them, to be taken to a spiritist hospital in the lower zone or in the one part of heaven, and they'll try to be given passes, and they'll try to help that person awaken and retain their spirit body. It shows you how much your thoughts influence when you pass over. Now, the next question was, you've told us that the moment of death you no longer saw, but that you foresaw. By this, we understand you mean you no longer saw with your bodily eyes, which is perfectly comprehensible. But we would like to know whether, before the life of your body was entirely extinct, you obtained a glimpse of the spirit world. He said, that's what I meant to say. The instant of death restores the spirit his normal clairvoyance. The bodily eyes no longer see, but the spirit, whose sight is far more penetrating, immediately discovers around him an unknown world, and this reality, becoming suddenly visible to him, gives him, though only momentarily, it is true, a sense of intense delight, of inexpressible distress, according to the state of his conscience and the remembrance of his past existence. So Allan Kardec writes, the spirit here is alluding to the instant preceding the loss of consciousness, which explains his saying through only momentarily, for the same agreeable or disagreeable impressions are again perceived by the spirit on his awakening in the other life. Then they asked him, be kind enough to tell us what you saw at the moment when your spirit eyes were open to the light of the other world. Describe to us as possible the aspect of the objects that then presented themselves to your sight. This is what he said. So isn't this interesting? He's actually going over what he saw, right? Now, this is right at his death, and just now it's 2 days after his death. This is what he said. When I came to myself and was able to look about me, I was dazzled and could not understand what I saw, for the mind does not regain clearness instantaneously. But God, who gave me profound proof of his goodness, allowed me to recover soon the use of my faculties. I perceived that I was surrounded by a numerous company of friends, among whom were all the spirit protectors who are in the habit of coming to our seances. They were rejoicing in my arrival and welcomed me with smiles. I felt myself to be in the enjoyment of the plenitude of health and strength, and was able to accompany them joyously and without effort through the vast expanse of space around me. But what I saw on my journey through immensity cannot be described in human speech. I shall come to you again, nevertheless, to speak with you at more length. So they kind of left him there at that day. And then, but then they asked him another question. It said, under what aspect did the spirit appear to you? Was it in human form? And he answered, yes, my dear friend. Our spirit friends have always told us upon the earth that they retain in the spirit world the transitory form that they wore in their last earthly life. And this is true. But what a difference between the clumsy human machine that drags itself along so heavy on the earth with its load of sorrows and trials, and the wondrous fluidity of the spirit body. There are no ugliness here, for all their features have lost the expression of harshness that is characteristic of the human race. God has blessed all those gracious body that move around in perfect elegance. Their beauty may truly be termed beatific, and their movements are the perfection of elegance and grace. The language of the spirits have intonations unknown to human speech, and their glance has the depths and brilliance of a star. Try to imagine all the beauty that can be built up by the power of the Supreme Architect, and you will have formed yourself to some faint idea of the appearance of spirits. And he goes, well, then he asks, well, how do you appear to yourself? He goes, I have preserved the form that resembles the human, but idealized, divinized form. So I said, I feel myself perfectly in possession of form and fingers, for we can, by our will, renders ourselves visible to you or press your hand. I'm close to you, and I've pressed the hand of each one of you without you being aware of my doing. So as I've said before, there is your thoughts control what you look like. So then as you think ideally as you want to look, that is how you look. Then they ask him, spirits are of no sex, but as only a few days ago you were a man, is there in your present state more of the masculine nature than of the feminine? How is it in this respect with spirits who have been separated for a long time with their earthly body? Here's the answer. For us, there is neither masculine nor feminine. There is no procreation among spirits. Spirits are created by God, since for the carrying out of his marvelous designs, he has willed that they should reincarnate themselves upon the earth. It was necessary to provide them with the means of effecting the reproduction of fleshly bodies through the agencies of males and females. But you can understand, without it being necessary to enter any explanation of the matter, there can be no sex in spirits. So, and Allan Kardec says, it's always been asserted by spirits that they are of no sex because the sexes are only needed for reproduction of bodies. And as the spirit does not reproduce themselves, sex would be useless. Our question was intended not to draw forth a fresh assertion of the fact, but to ascertain whether after death, so recent as that of Mr. Sampson, the spirit retained in this respect any impression of the terrestrial state. Spirits have reached a certain degree of purity are perfectly aware of their non-sexual nature, but among those of lower degree who are not yet dematerialized, there are many who believe themselves to be still what they were upon earth. They have preserved the same passions, the same desires, and imagine themselves to still be men and women. Hence it is that some of them have declared that spirits are of one or the other sex. So again, that I've read in other ones is it's in the sex is they'll appear male or female because it depends on the bent that they take, right? Do they have the passive and aggressive kind of more leaning to the male side, or they have the passive and aggressive traits leading more towards the female side? And then as they go higher and higher, all these traits start balancing themselves, right? This is what we were told in the books by Reverend G. Owen, and you can read about this in Heaven and Below, and the Spirits and the Spirit Universe, and how we're guided by spirits, my series of 3 books. And it really tells you why they divide us in the 2 sexes. They said that if they wanted to, they could have made us asexual and we could have reproduced ourselves. But it would have been harder to learn the lessons we needed to learn. It's like any type of heuristics. They break down the problem so it's easier. So they wanted you to learn kind of the male type of aggression and the aggression and the passivity and all that provides on that side. And they also want you to learn about the female side and aggressive and passivity of that. And therefore, then that's why marriage is so important, because the male can watch the female and how they act, and the female can watch the male how they act, and they can understand this. And then later on, they can come back as a male or female and then learn more. So it's all about learning all different sides. But that's why someone, when people have had NDE experiences, and then also when they describe Jesus, it's like he has this male, force about him, but then he also have this mothering aura about him. So it's like he's a perfect balance of everything, and that's why they feel so much love. So it's very interesting. This shows us what we go through. So he goes in and says that he can read people's thought in a seance. And then they say, okay, you say you can read our thoughts. Can you explain to us the way in which the perception of thought is affected? So before I talk about what the answer, what he said is that we've been told by spirits that spirits, even the spirits on the lower zone, can read our thoughts. We're an open book to spirits. So this is what he said. It is not easy to do so, to explain to you the prodigious faculty of the spirit sight. It would be necessary to begin by giving you the knowledge of a whole arsenal of agent unknown to you, and by rendering you as learned as we are, which could not be done because your faculties are limited by your physical organism. Patience, try to become good, and you will attain this knowledge. As yet, you have only the amount of knowledge that corresponds to your degree of advancement. In course of time, you will be as we are. Try to die the death of the righteous, so that you may be able to learn much in the other life. Let curiosity, that is the stimulus of the reflective mind, lead you on gently to the passage that will procure you for the satisfaction of all your desires of knowledge, past, present, and future. Meanwhile, let me say, by way of replying as well as I can to the question you've just addressed me, that the air by which you are surrounded, impalpable as we are, takes the impress of your thought. Every breath you exhale is, so to say, a page in what your thought is written, and all those pages are read and commented upon by the spirits who are incessantly about you, messengers of a divine telegraphy which nothing escapes. So let me expound on that a little bit. What we were told later by the spirit Emmanuel, who it was Chico Xavier's spirit mentor, is that each of our thoughts is tagged with a unique ID. So it's the same concept as a cell phone, right? When you have a cell phone and it transmits to a cell tower, and so your message goes out, and so how does it know to come back in? Because it has a geolocation and it has a unique ID. That's how someone can call you back. You make a conversation. Same for us. Everything must be encoded. So Emmanuel said everything, our thoughts, our feelings, where we were, everything is traced. We are like an open book. There's every moment of our life. And in NDEs, near-death experiences, people come back and say, yeah, I went through and they showed me this passage from my life, and they not only showed me what I thought, but they showed me what other people thought too. It shows you that there's this huge cloud of data that's all around us. And it's just so interesting that they can, they can retrieve this information upon, the higher spirits, right? When they bring people for their near-death experiences, they can retrieve this information instantly and show what is going on. So that is the world is awaiting for you. Now, I will, in my next Wednesdays, I will go for more responses from people who went to the levels of heaven, or people that went down lower or even lower. So this is fascinating that Allan Kardec is actually almost real time talking to these spirits and getting us what they feel. This will give you an idea of what is awaiting for you, and also gives you the incentive to know that the more you can improve yourself in this life, the more you'll be helped out of the body, the happier, the higher you will be in the levels of heaven, and most importantly, the better life you'll have in the next life. Because what are we told by Spiritism all the time? For every action, there's a reaction. That means not only things that you think that you've done wrong, that you may have to relearn not to do that in your next life, but things that you have done really well, you're rewarded in your next life. So these are all factors to think about. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people say, well, I like my privacy. I don't like to be watched all the time, but that's not the world we live in, and we have no choice in that. So I think, which is why I'm talking here about Spiritism, I want people to understand really where you're at. You're in this college, this campus, and it's got glass walls, and every thought, good or bad or indifferent, right, is recorded, and you're evaluated. And yes, it can get tiring, but the main thing is all the spirits that look at you, they know they've been through this before, they understand it, they love you, and you still have free will. You can just say, yeah, I don't care if they care what I'm thinking, I'll just do what I want to. That's perfectly fine. Everyone has that choice, and everyone has plenty of lives, right? As many lives as you want, if you want to ascend or not. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for being with me on this Wednesday night. Please tell your friends. I've just started this. And I hope more people come to Spiritism, the Spirit World Around Us, a Facebook group. We've got a lot of people in the group. I want to get more people here. Please share this video. I'm going to post this video to YouTube so everybody can watch it, and also BitChute. Please go to YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel or my BitChute channel. Please share the video from YouTube. That really helps the algorithm, and please like it. So I want to say God bless all of you tonight, and God bless you. And whenever you want, ask me questions, and I would love to help any one of you. Oh, but I do want to say one last thing. I want to put this up. If you would like, yes, it's recorded in your perispirit. Yes, everything is recorded. I think it's probably recorded in your perispirit. I know that any language, what I was read in a book by Divaldo Franco, and I forgot the spirit that said it to him, is that any language you ever learned, you'll be able, when you're a spirit, you'll be able to translate that because you have it in your perispirit. I don't think all of everything else recorded spirit, but I think it's your whole thoughts for your whole lives, and all your lives are probably recorded. Who knows where else within this universe is so complex? I'm sure that I can't understand it. But these are good questions. And if anyone out here wants to study more about Spiritism, go to spiritismstudy.org. I already have a couple of people signed up, and we meet once a week. We talk about Spiritism. I don't make anybody, thank you too, Jacob. I don't make anybody study anything, and there's no test. There's no one asks for any money. I just the conversation goes as you would like the conversation to go. We talk about different aspects. We can talk about different books. So yes, go to spiritismstudy.org. If you want to get into this, you want to talk to me personally, there's other people that will talk. There's Sergio there on the system, and you can set up appointments with him. And so there's all great information. And lastly, just to say that a lot of what I'm talking about is feel interesting to see on my book, Heaven and Below, book 1 of Spiritism. I have a series of 3 books. I think that would really give you a lot of information about the spirit world. So I want to leave it at that. I want to say goodbye and good night to everyone. And hopefully I will see you next Wednesday. Also on Sunday on Kardec Radio Facebook page, you can see me live streaming at the same time, right? Which is 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific, all the time zones around the world.